A single scrap of paper can change a life, or end one. For Julian Thorne, the billionaire CEO of Thorne Enterprises, the end was sitting right across from him, wearing a diamond engagement ring he had paid for. He thought he was celebrating a merger. In reality, he was minutes away from a federal prison cell. But he didn't know that. The only person who knew the truth was a 22-year-old waitress named Alice, trembling in the corner with a coffee stain on her apron. She had 5 seconds to make a choice: keep her head down and stay safe, or slip him a note that would declare war on the most dangerous woman in New York City. She chose the note. And tonight, you're going to find out why that decision almost got her killed. The air inside l'Orangerie, Manhattan's most exclusive French restaurant, always smelled the same: distinct notes of truffle oil, expensive perfume, and old money. For Alice Jenkins, however, it just smelled like exhaustion. Alice adjusted her bow tie in the reflection of a polished brass railing. She had been on her feet for 10 hours. Her student loans were 3 months overdue, her landlord was threatening eviction, and her feet felt like they were bleeding inside her cheap, non-slip shoes. But she needed this shift. The tips at l'Orangerie on a Friday night could cover half her rent, provided she didn't drop anything and remained invisible. "Table 4 is yours, Jenkins," the floor manager, Marcus, barked. Marcus was a short, oily man who sweated profusely and treated the waitstaff like indentured servants. "And don't mess it up. That's Julian Thorne." Alice's stomach tightened. Everyone knew Julian Thorne. He was the tech mogul who had revolutionized cybersecurity with his company, Aegis. He was 32, devastatingly handsome in that tired, brooding way billionaires often were, and recently engaged to Vanessa Sterling, a socialite whose father owned half the real estate in the Hamptons. "I've got it, Marcus," Alice said, grabbing her tray. "If you spill so much as a drop of water, you're fired before it hits the floor," Marcus hissed. Alice walked out onto the floor. Table 4 was the prime spot, secluded in an alcove with a view of the skyline. Julian Thorne was already seated, looking at his phone with a furrowed brow. He wore a navy bespoke suit that probably cost more than Alice's entire college education. Across from him sat Vanessa Sterling. Vanessa was undeniably beautiful, but it was a sharp, predatory kind of beauty. She wore a crimson silk dress that looked like it had been poured over her skin, and her eyes, cold and blue, were darting around the room as if she were calculating the net worth of every patron. Alice approached the table, putting on her best customer service smile. "Good evening. Welcome to l'Orangerie. My name is Alice, and I'll be taking care of you tonight. Can I start you off with—" "Sparkling water," Vanessa interrupted, not even looking at Alice. She was typing furiously on her phone. "And bring the wine list, the reserve list." "Of course," Alice said, glancing at Julian. Julian looked up, and for a split second, his eyes met Alice's. He looked exhausted. "Just a scotch for me. Neat. Whatever is oldest." "Rough day?" Alice asked, the words slipping out before she could stop them. Vanessa snapped her head up. "Excuse me? We are not here to make small talk with the help. Get the drinks." "I apologize," Alice murmured, retreating quickly. As she waited at the bar for the drinks, she watched them. There was no love at that table. The air between them was thick with tension. Julian looked like a man carrying the weight of the world, while Vanessa looked anxious. She kept checking her watch. Alice returned with the drinks. As she placed the crystal glass of scotch down, Vanessa stood up abruptly. "I need to powder my nose," Vanessa announced. She grabbed her clutch, a tiny glittering thing, and brushed past Alice, nearly knocking the tray out of her hand. "Watch it," Vanessa hissed under her breath. Alice stabilized the tray, her heart pounding. She watched Vanessa walk toward the restrooms. A few moments later, Marcus signaled Alice. Go check the VIP restroom. The towel supply is low." Alice sighed and headed to the back. The VIP restrooms were essentially private lounges. As she pushed the heavy oak door open, she heard a voice. It was Vanessa. She was in the parlor area of the restroom, pacing, her phone pressed to her ear. Alice froze. The acoustics in the tiled room were perfect. She could hear every word. "I don't care if he's suspicious," Vanessa whispered, her voice trembling with a mix of excitement and malice. "It's done. I planted the drive in his jacket pocket while we were in the car." Alice held her breath, pressing herself against the wall behind a decorative fern. "Yes," Vanessa continued. "The SEC agents are already parked down the block. As soon as we leave the restaurant, they pull us over. They find the drive with the embezzled funds data on it. He goes down for fraud and insider trading tonight. With the prenup voided by a criminal charge, I get control of the board seats." Alice felt a cold chill run down her spine. This wasn't just a bad relationship. This was a corporate assassination. "Stop worrying," Vanessa snapped at the person on the other end. "Julian is an idiot when it comes to trust. He thinks I'm planning a surprise honeymoon. He has no idea his life is over in about 45 minutes. Just make sure the press is there when the cuffs go on." Vanessa hung up and let out a long, shaky breath. She checked her makeup in the mirror, applied a layer of blood-red lipstick, and smiled, a cruel, victorious smile. Alice waited until Vanessa left the restroom before she dared to move. Her legs felt like jelly. She walked over to the sink and splashed cold water on her face. What do I do? She was a nobody, a waitress. If she went out there and told a billionaire that his fiancée was framing him for federal crimes, he'd think she was crazy. Vanessa would deny it. Marcus would fire her. She could lose everything. But if I do nothing, an innocent man goes to prison. Alice remembered her father. He had been a small business owner, destroyed by a partner who cooked the books and framed him. Her father had died of a heart attack 2 years later, broken and shamed. She remembered the look in his eyes, the look of a man who realized too late that the person he trusted was holding the knife. She couldn't let that happen to Julian Thorne. She grabbed a generic order pad from her apron. Her hands were shaking. She needed to be quick. She couldn't make a scene. She took a pen and wrote in block letters on the back of a receipt paper, "Do not react. Your fiancé planted a drive in your jacket pocket. The police are waiting outside. It's a trap. Leave now." She folded the paper until it was a tiny square. She took a deep breath. This was it. Alice walked back onto the floor. The restaurant was louder now, the clinking of silverware covering the sound of her pounding heart. She approached table 4. Vanessa was back in her seat, holding a menu, looking the picture of elegance. Julian was staring into his scotch. "Are we ready to order?" Alice asked, her voice surprisingly steady. "I'll have the lobster thermidor," Vanessa said dismissively. "And for you, sir?" Alice turned to Julian. "The steak. Rare," Julian muttered. "Excellent choice," Alice said. She reached for the empty bread basket on the table to clear it. As she did, she deliberately knocked her own pen off the table. It clattered near Julian's foot. "Oh, I'm so clumsy. I apologize," Alice said, dropping to a crouch instantly. Julian, being a gentleman, shifted to help. "It's fine, don't worry about." Under the tablecloth, hidden from Vanessa's view by the heavy linen, Alice reached for the pen. As Julian's hand came down to retrieve it, she pressed the folded note directly into his palm. She looked up at him from her crouched position. Her eyes were wide, desperate. She squeezed his hand for a fraction of a second. A silent plea. Read it. Julian froze. He felt the paper against his skin. He looked down at the waitress. He saw the terror in her eyes. This wasn't a flirtation. This was a warning. He closed his fist around the paper. "Got it," Julian said, his voice changing slightly. He sat back up, sliding the hand with the paper into his lap. Alice stood up, smoothing her apron. I'll get that order right in." She walked away, her legs feeling like lead. She went to the service station, but instead of entering the order, she watched. Julian kept his face neutral. He was a poker player in the boardroom. He knew how to hide his emotions. Under the table, he unfolded the paper. He glanced down, reading the block letters. "Your fiancé planted a drive in your jacket pocket." Julian's heart skipped a beat. His jacket was draped over the back of his chair. He remembered Vanessa insisting he wear this specific jacket, the grey Tom Ford, because she said it matched her dress better than the black one. He remembered her being oddly touchy-feely in the car, adjusting his collar, patting his chest. He looked across the table. Vanessa was smiling at her phone again. "Who are you texting, darling?" Julian asked. His voice was calm, but the ice in his glass seemed to reflect the sudden chill in his eyes. "Just the wedding planner," Vanessa lied smoothly. "Confirming the flowers for the rehearsal dinner." Liar, Julian thought. "We finalized the flowers last week. He needed to check the jacket, but he couldn't do it with her watching. He needed a distraction." "Vanessa," Julian said, leaning forward, "I have a surprise for you, but I left it in the coat check. I was going to wait until dessert, but I feel like giving it to you now." Vanessa's eyes lit up. Greed was her tell. "Really? What is it?" "A necklace, to match the ring," he lied. "But I need you to close your eyes and count to 60. No peeking. It's bad luck." Vanessa giggled, a sound that now grated on his ears. "You're so dramatic. Okay, 60 seconds. She closed her eyes and covered them with her hands, play-acting the excited bride. The moment her eyes closed, Julian moved with terrifying speed. He reached behind him and slid his hand into the inner pocket of his jacket. His fingers brushed against silk, and then hard plastic. His blood ran cold. He pulled it out. A black USB drive. It wasn't his. He had never seen it before. The waitress was telling the truth. He looked toward the service station. Alice was standing there, pretending to wipe a glass, but her eyes were locked on him. He gave her the slightest nod. He slipped the USB drive into his pants pocket, tight against his thigh. He didn't put it back in the jacket. 58, 59, 60. Vanessa uncovered her eyes. "Well?" Julian smiled. It was a wolf smile, though Vanessa didn't notice. "I realized I should probably get the waiter to bring it on a silver platter. Make it more special." Vanessa pouted. "You tease." "I have to use the restroom first," Julian said, standing up. "I'll be right back." "Don't take too long," Vanessa said, picking up her wine. "We have a big night ahead of us." "Oh, you have no idea," Julian muttered. He walked toward the back, but he didn't go to the restroom. He spotted Alice near the kitchen doors. He walked straight up to her. Marcus, the manager, saw this and immediately rushed over, looking panicked. "Mr. Thorne, is everything all right? Is this girl bothering you?" Marcus glared at Alice. "If she's been incompetent, I will fire her immediately." "She's been excellent," Julian said, his voice commanding. He ignored Marcus and looked directly at Alice. "Where is the back exit?" Marcus looked confused. "Sir? The back exit is through the kitchen, but surely I need to leave. Now. Without my fiancée seeing me," Julian said. He pulled a money clip from his pocket and peeled off 5 $100 bills. He shoved them into Marcus's chest. "This is for the dinner. And this," he pulled out a black American Express Centurion card and handed it to Alice, "is for you to hold on to. I'll come back for it. Alice's eyes widened. "Sir, Take me to the back. Now," he commanded. Alice nodded. "Follow me." She led him through the swinging doors into the chaotic, steaming kitchen. Chefs shouted orders. Pans flared with fire. Alice weaved through the madness, Julian close behind. They reached the heavy metal door at the back, leading to the alleyway where the garbage trucks parked. Julian paused with his hand on the push bar. He turned to Alice. "Why?" he asked. "Why did you warn me?" "You don't know me." "I know a setup when I see one," Alice said, her voice shaking slightly now that the adrenaline was fading. "My dad. Something similar happened to him. I couldn't watch it happen again." Julian looked at her, really looked at her, for the first time. He memorized her face, the messy bun, the tired eyes, the fierce determination. "What is your full name?" "Alice. Alice Jenkins." "Alice Jenkins," Julian repeated. "If I make it out of this, you're never going to clear tables again." He pushed the door open and stepped out into the cool night air of the alley. He didn't run. He walked briskly toward the main road, but away from the front entrance of the restaurant where the police were waiting. Inside the restaurant, Vanessa checked her watch. 10 minutes had passed. "Where is he?" She texted her contact. "Is he outside?" The reply came. "No movement. We are holding position." Vanessa frowned. She signaled Marcus. "Manager, where is my fiancé?" Marcus, sweating more than usual, approached the table. He looked nervous. He had the cash in his pocket, but he was terrified of Vanessa. Everyone in the city knew Vanessa Sterling could ruin a business with one phone call to the health inspector. He went to the kitchen, Miss Sterling." "The kitchen? Why?" "He said he wanted to compliment the chef." Marcus lied poorly. Vanessa stood up, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. "Something is wrong." She marched toward the kitchen. She burst through the doors, ignoring the shocked cries of the staff. "Where is Julian Thorne?" she screamed. The kitchen went silent. Alice was standing by the dishwasher, loading plates. She kept her head down. "He left, ma'am," a sous chef said, pointing to the back door. "About 5 minutes ago." "Left?" Vanessa's face went pale. "Without me?" She pulled out her phone. No messages. She dialed Julian, straight to voicemail. Panic began to set in. If he wasn't in the car, if he didn't have the jacket on when the police stopped him. She ran out the back door into the alley. It was empty, just dumpsters and stray cats. Her phone buzzed. It was her contact. Target not in sight. But we just saw his personal driver leave the front empty. "We are aborting the stop." "What is going on?" Vanessa screamed, a primal sound of rage that echoed off the brick walls. She threw her phone against the dumpster, shattering the screen. Back inside, Marcus was cornering Alice near the dish pit. "You!" Marcus growled, his face purple. "You walked him out. I saw you." "He asked for the exit, Marcus," Alice said, trying to stand her ground. "You interfered with a VIP guest. You caused a scene," Marcus shouted, oblivious to the actual stakes. "I don't care what he gave you. You are finished here. Get your things and get out. You're fired." Alice untied her apron. She knew this was coming. She placed the apron on the counter. "Fine," she said. "I quit." She walked out the back door, past the screaming Vanessa, and into the dark streets of New York. She had lost her job. She had no money for rent. She was alone. But as she walked toward the subway, clutching her thin coat around her, she smiled. For the first time in years, she felt like she had won. She just didn't realize that the war had only just begun. Alice Jenkins lived in a 4th-floor walk-up in Astoria, Queens, above a laundromat that smelled perpetually of bleach and fabric softener. Her apartment was the size of a generous walk-in closet, furnished with items salvaged from the sidewalk on garbage day. An hour after fleeing l'Orangerie, she was sitting on her futon, staring at the object on her scratched coffee table. The black American Express Centurion card. It was heavy, made of titanium. It represented more money than her entire family line had earned in 3 generations. She hadn't used it for the subway. She hadn't bought food, even though her stomach was growling fiercely. To Alice, it wasn't money. It was radioactive material. It was proof she had involved herself in something deadly. Her phone buzzed. A text from her landlord. "Rent was due yesterday, Alice. Don't make me change the locks." She put her head in her hands. Fired, broke, and holding a billionaire's credit card. At 1:30 a.m., there was a knock on her door. It wasn't a tentative knock. It was 3 solid, authoritative raps. Alice froze. Marcus wouldn't come here. Vanessa Sterling wouldn't be caught dead in Queens. Police? She crept to the door and looked through the peephole. She gasped and stumbled back. It was Julian Thorne. He was still wearing the impeccable Tom Ford suit, but the bow tie was undone, hanging loose around his neck. He looked out of place in the dim, peeling hallway, like a panther pacing in a cardboard box. Alice unlocked the deadbolt and opened the door a crack, leaving the security chain on. "How did you find me?" she whispered. Julian held up his phone. "I own Aegis Cybersecurity. Finding people is what my algorithms do before breakfast. May I come in, Alice?" She hesitated. He was a stranger, powerful, and currently desperate. But she had already saved him once. She undid the chain and opened the door. Julian stepped inside, and the apartment seemed to shrink around him. He took in the peeling paint, the stack of overdue bills on the small counter, the single ramen noodle cup in the trash. His expression didn't change, but his eyes softened slightly. "It's not much," Alice said defensively, crossing her arms. "It's safe," Julian corrected. "Which is more than I can say for my penthouse right now." He walked over to the coffee table and picked up the black card. He didn't put it in his pocket. He just held it, turning it over in his fingers. "You didn't use it," he stated. "It's not mine. Most people in this city wouldn't let that stop them, especially if they just got fired because of me." Alice shrugged. "My dad always said, if you didn't sweat for it, it's not yours." Julian looked at her, a strange intensity in his gaze. "Your father sounds like an honorable man. Rare these days." He sat down on the edge of the rickety futon. The springs groaned in protest. "I checked the drive." Alice tensed. "And?" "It wasn't embezzlement data. That would have been too simple for Vanessa." Julian's voice dropped to a low growl. "It was classified Defense Department server schematics, stolen from my own company's vaults." Alice clapped a hand over her mouth. "Oh my God. If the police had found that on me, I wouldn't have just gone to jail for fraud. I would have been handed over to the FBI for treason. I'd never see the sun again. Aegis would be liquidated, and Vanessa and her backers would buy the pieces for pennies on the dollar." He looked up at Alice, and for the first time, the billionaire facade cracked completely. He looked terrified. "You didn't just save me from a scandal, Alice. You saved my life." The gravity of the situation hit Alice like a physical blow. She sank onto a kitchen chair opposite him. Why would she do that? She was going to marry you. A bitter laugh escaped Julian's lips. "Vanessa doesn't marry for love. She marries for leverage. I was just a particularly large acquisition target. I assume her father's real estate empire is over-leveraged, and they need my liquid assets to bail them out. Destroying me was quicker than waiting for a divorce settlement." He stood up and paced the 3 feet of available floor space. "I can't go back to my office. She'll have eyes there. I can't use my usual devices. She might have compromised them. I am effectively ghosted until I can prove she planted that drive. He stopped pacing and turned to Alice. I need help. And right now, the list of people I trust in this city has exactly one name on it. Alice pointed to herself, wide-eyed. Me? I'm a waitress. Ex-waitress. I don't know anything about cyber espionage. Exactly, Julian said. You aren't in the system. You aren't on her radar as a threat. You're the unknown variable. He held out the black card again. I want to hire you, Alice Jenkins, not to carry plates, but to be my eyes, my ears, and my runner in the real world while I work in the shadows to bury Vanessa Sterling. 45 minutes later, in a penthouse overlooking Central Park that cost more than Alice's entire apartment building, Vanessa Sterling was throwing a baccarat crystal vase across the room. It shattered against a marble fireplace. How could you lose him? She screamed into her phone. On the other end was the head of the private security firm she had hired to tail Julian. Ms. Sterling, the driver said Mr. Thorne exited the vehicle 3 blocks from the restaurant and entered a subway station. We lost him in the crowd. He ditched his phone in a trash can on 5th Avenue. He's not in the subway, you idiots. He doesn't take subways. Vanessa paced, her heels clicking sharply on the hardwood floors. He knows. Somehow, he knows. She stopped pacing. Her mind replayed the night at the restaurant. Julian's strange behavior, the way he went to the restroom and never came back, the delay. And then she remembered the clumsy waitress, the dropped pen. Vanessa's eyes narrowed into slits. The girl, she hissed. What girl, Miss Sterling? The waitress at l'Orangerie, the little mouse with the messy hair. She was at the table right before he changed his demeanor. She must have told him something, or passed him something. Vanessa felt a cold rage bubble up. A nobody. A servant had ruined a plan 6 months in the making. Forget tracking Julian for a moment, Vanessa commanded. I have a new job for you. Find out who that waitress was. Marcus at the restaurant will know. Find her. Squeeze her. I want to know where Julian Thorne is, and that little bitch is the key. Understood. How aggressive do you want us to be? Vanessa examined her perfect manicure. Terrify her. Make her understand that interfering with my life is a fatal error. Meanwhile, back in Queens, Alice was staring at Julian as if he had grown a second head. Hire me to do what, exactly? She asked. I need a ghost, Julian explained rapidly. I need someone to buy burner phones, secure laptops, rent a sterile workspace, all in cash, with no paper trail leading back to me. Vanessa will be monitoring my bank accounts. If I withdraw $5, she'll know where I am. You want me to be your money mule, Alice summarized flatly. I want you to be my operations manager in a war zone, Julian corrected, and I am prepared to pay for the risk. He pulled out the money clip he had shown at the restaurant. He peeled off $20 $100 bills, $2,000 cash, and placed them on her table next to the black card. This is your retainer for tonight. Tomorrow your salary is $10,000 a week until this is resolved. Alice looked at the cash. It was enough to pay her back rent, her current rent, and buy groceries for a month. $10,000 a week, her voice squeaked. Is that insufficient? 15. No, 10 is insane. Alice felt dizzy. But Mr. Thorne, Julian, please, Julian, if Vanessa is as dangerous as you say, isn't being near you putting a target on my back? Julian's expression darkened. She's already noticed you, Alice. Vanessa doesn't believe in coincidence. If she hasn't figured out you warned me yet, she will by morning. You aren't safe here anymore. That landlord of yours won't be the only one knocking on this door. Alice realized with a sickening lurch that he was right. By trying to do the right thing, she had stepped off the sidewalk and directly onto a freeway. "Okay," Alice said, her voice trembling but resolute. She picked up the cash. "I'm in." "What's the first move, boss?" Julian actually smiled, a real smile that reached his tired eyes. "Pack a bag. Small. Essentials only. We're leaving in 10 minutes. This apartment is burned." They took a yellow cab, hailed on the street, no apps, deep into Brooklyn, to an industrial area near the Navy Yard that seemed deserted at 3:00 a.m. Warehouses loomed like sleeping giants against the hazy orange sky of the city. The cab dropped them in front of a nondescript brick building with barred windows and a rusted sign that read, "Patel Textiles, closed." "This is it?" Alice asked, clutching her canvas backpack. She was wearing jeans and a hoodie, having foregone her waitress uniform. "Looks deceiving, doesn't it?" Julian walked to a side steel door. There was no handle, just a smooth metal plate next to it. Julian placed his entire palm on the plate. A hidden scanner beamed red light over his hand. A heavy mechanical clunk echoed from inside the door, followed by the hiss of a hydraulic seal breaking. The door swung open heavily. Alice followed him inside. The contrast was jarring. The exterior was urban decay. The interior was NASA. They were standing on a metal catwalk overlooking a cavernous space filled with rows upon rows of server racks. The air was freezing cold, kept that way to cool the machines, and filled with the deafening white noise of thousands of cooling fans. Blue and green indicator lights blinked hypnotically in the dark, like a digital city stretching out before them. "Welcome to Aegis Site, Baker," Julian shouted over the noise. "My off-the-books redundancy facility. Not even my board of directors knows this place exists. It has its own power generator and satellite uplink. We're completely off the grid." He led her down a metal staircase to a glass-walled control room suspended in the center of the server farm. Inside, it was blessedly quiet. There were 3 massive curved monitors, ergonomic chairs, and a small kitchenette in the corner. Julian immediately went to the main console and began typing furiously. The screen sprang to life with cascading lines of code that made Alice dizzy just looking at them. "Make yourself comfortable," Julian said, not looking up. "There's a cot in the back room if you need sleep. I won't be sleeping tonight." Alice sat in one of the chairs, watching him work. He was a different person here. At the restaurant, he had looked burdened, almost defeated. Here, amidst the roaring technology, he looked like a maestro conducting an orchestra. "What are you doing?" she asked after a while. "I'm building a digital cage," Julian muttered, his fingers flying across the mechanical keyboard. Vanessa planted the drive, but she didn't steal the data herself. She wouldn't know how. She hired someone inside Aegis to get it for her. "I'm hunting the mole." He pulled the black USB drive from his pocket and plugged it into an isolated port on the console. Instantly, red warning boxes popped up on the screens. Unauthorized hardware detected. Security protocol initiated. Julian overrode them with a biometric scan of his retina. "It's loaded with malware that would have bricked any normal computer and alerted the authorities," he explained. "But here, I can dissect it in a sandbox environment." For hours, Alice watched him. She made coffee in the small kitchenette, bringing him a mug which he accepted without looking away from the screen. Around 6 a.m., just as the sun was thinking about rising outside the windowless bunker, Julian slammed his fist onto the desk in frustration. "Damn it!" "What's wrong?" Alice jerked awake from a light doze. "The mole is good. They covered their tracks. The access logs for the stolen files were wiped clean. I know what was stolen, but I can't prove who stole it. Without that link, I can't prove Vanessa's involvement." He rubbed his burning eyes. "We're at a dead end." Alice stood up and walked over to the screens, looking at the bewildering data. "You're looking at the computer stuff," she said softly. "Like the digital footprints, right?" "Yes, the access logs. My dad used to say, when you can't find the thief, look for what they bought with the money." Julian stopped typing. He slowly turned his chair to face her. "Explain. Whoever stole this, they didn't do it for free. Vanessa paid them. A lot, probably. People who suddenly get a lot of money do stupid things. They buy cars, they pay off debts, they book vacations." Julian stared at her for a full 10 seconds. Then, a brilliant, terrifying smile spread across his face. "Alice Jenkins," he whispered, "you are a genius." He spun back to the console. "Forget the company servers. I'm going to hack the personal bank accounts of every executive-level employee at Aegis with access to those files. I'm looking for a sudden, inexplicable influx of cash in the last 48 hours. His fingers flew again, renewed with purpose. "It's illegal as hell. But if they want to play dirty, we'll play dirty." 20 minutes later, one of the screens flashed red. A profile popped up. A man with a weak chin and thinning hair. Arthur Penhaligon, VP of Infrastructure. "Got you," Julian snarled. "Arthur, 20 years with the company, and yesterday morning, an offshore account in the Cayman Islands linked to his name received a wire transfer for $2 million from a shell company located in... Look at that. The same building where Vanessa's father has his offices." "Is that enough proof?" Alice asked, her heart pounding. "It's enough to dangle Arthur over a precipice," Julian said, his voice icy. "We don't need to break Vanessa. We just need to break the weak link she hired." He stood up, energized. "Alice, I need you to go out. I need 2 prepaid phones and a very specific type of wireless transmitter. There's an electronics store in Chinatown that opens at 8 a.m. They don't ask questions." He turned to write down a list for her. As he did, Alice glanced up at a smaller monitor in the corner that showed a grainy, black and white feed from a security camera outside the warehouse building. A black Cadillac Escalade with tinted windows was slowly rolling down the deserted street. It slowed down right in front of the Patel Textiles sign, paused for a moment, and then continued to the end of the block, where it pulled over and idled. "Julian," Alice said, her voice tight with fear. "Do you get many visitors out here?" Julian looked up at the monitor. His face went rigid. "No," he said. "Never." Vanessa's hunters had found the scent. Julian watched the monitor, his face illuminated by the ghostly green glow of the screen. On the street above, 2 men in dark suits stepped out of the Escalade. They weren't police. They moved with the confident, heavy gait of mercenaries. One of them checked a handheld device, scanning the building's facade. "How?" Julian whispered, his mind racing. "This facility is a black hole. No signals in or out unless I authorize them." Alice stood beside him, gripping the edge of the desk until her knuckles turned white. Could they have followed the taxi? No. I scrambled the traffic cam feeds for 3 blocks in every direction before we hailed it. We were ghosts. Julian's eyes suddenly widened. He ripped off his Tom Ford jacket, the grey one Vanessa had insisted he wear. He threw it onto the desk and began tearing at the lining. "What are you doing?" Alice asked. "The jacket," Julian hissed. "She didn't just plant the drive in the pocket. She wanted to make sure that if I ran, she could find me." He ripped open the shoulder padding. Nestled deep inside the cotton batting was a device no larger than a grain of rice. A passive, military-grade tracker. "She tagged me like a migrating shark," Julian growled, crushing the device under the heel of his boot. "Smart, viciously smart." Above them, a dull thud echoed through the warehouse. The men were breaching the main steel door. "They're in," Alice said, her voice trembling. "What do we do? Call the police?" "And tell them what? That I'm hiding in a secret bunker while wanted for treason?" Julian shook his head. "If those men find us, we disappear. Permanently. We need to move." Julian typed a final command into the console. The screens went black. "System wipe initiated. Come on." He grabbed Alice's hand and pulled her toward the back of the server room. Instead of a door, he kicked aside a metal grate on the floor, revealing a dark, narrow ladder descending into the earth. "The old cooling tunnels," Julian explained. "They lead to the subway lines. It's tight, it's dirty, and it smells like 80 years of stagnant water. Ladies first." Alice didn't hesitate. She swung her legs into the hole. As she descended, she heard the heavy crash of the server room door being blown off its hinges upstairs. Voices shouted in the distance. "Clear! Room is clear!" A rough voice bellowed from above. "Find the stairs! He can't be far!" Julian dropped down the ladder and slid the grate back into place above them. He clicked on a small penlight, revealing a tunnel that was barely 4 feet high, dripping with condensation. "Run," he whispered. They scrambled through the tunnel, hunched over, their feet splashing in inch-deep sludge. Alice could hear her own breath rasping in her throat. She was a waitress from Queens who worried about tips and rent. Now she was crawling through a sewer with a billionaire, fleeing hitmen. "This is insane," she thought. "This is actually insane." "We need a destination," Alice panted as they moved. "We have the proof about Arthur Penhaligon. We know he took the bribe. Where is he?" "My system tracked his phone before I wiped the servers," Julian said, his voice echoing in the tunnel. "He's at Teterboro Airport in New Jersey. He has a flight plan filed for a private charter to Grand Cayman, departing at 9:00 a.m. That gives us," he checked his watch, "less than 2 hours. If he gets on that plane, he's gone, and the money trail disappears into a Caribbean black hole. We have to stop him on the tarmac." They reached the end of the tunnel. A rusted maintenance door stood before them. Julian threw his weight against it. It groaned, but held. "Stuck," he grunted. "Let me," Alice said. She looked at the hinges. They were rusted through. "Don't push the door. Kick the hinge." Julian looked at her, then stepped back and delivered a vicious kick to the bottom hinge. The metal snapped, and the door fell outward with a clang. They tumbled out onto a subway maintenance ledge. A train roared past them, a blur of silver and light, the wind whipping their hair. They were in the tunnel between stations. "We need a car!" Julian yelled over the noise of the receding train. "And I don't have my phone!" They climbed up to the nearest platform, a deserted station in the outer boroughs. They ran up the stairs to street level. It was dawn now, the sky a bruised purple. A bread delivery truck was idling at a red light, the driver in the back arranging crates. Julian looked at Alice. "I've never stolen a car." Alice looked at the truck, then at Julian. "I grew up in a neighborhood where leaving your keys in the ignition was an invitation. Leave the talking to me." Alice ran up to the driver's side window. The driver, a burly man with a thick beard, looked down. "Hey, lady, back off!" "Sir, please!" Alice screamed, putting on the performance of a lifetime. She pointed at Julian, who was holding his chest and leaning against a lamp-post, looking pale. "My husband. He's having a heart attack. My phone is dead. We need to get to the hospital." The driver's face softened. "Oh, geez. Okay, hop in. I'll take you." "No time," Alice yelled. "He needs to lie down flat. The back. We need the back." Before the driver could argue, Alice ran to the back, shoved Julian inside among the loaves of sourdough, and jumped in after him. "Go! Go! St. Mary's Hospital!" she screamed through the partition. The driver floored it. As the truck rumbled forward, Julian looked at Alice, sitting amidst crates of bread. He began to laugh, a dry, incredulous sound. "Heart attack?" he asked. "It worked, didn't it?" Alice grinned, wiping a smudge of grease from her cheek. "Alice," Julian said, his face turning serious, "when this is over, assuming we survive, I am going to buy you a bakery, or a hospital, whatever you want." "Let's just catch a traitor first," Alice said. The bread truck driver was confused when his dying passenger and his wife demanded to be let out at a gas station near the George Washington Bridge. But a $1,000 tip from Julian's cash clip silenced his questions. They managed to hail a legitimate Uber from there, using the last of the cash to bribe the driver for speed. They arrived at Teterboro Airport's perimeter fence at 8:45 a.m. Private aviation terminals don't have the same security as commercial ones, but they still have fences. However, Julian Thorne knew Teterboro like the back of his hand. "There's a gap in the fence near Hangar 4, Julian said, leading Alice through a patch of tall weeds. "I used to sneak out this way when I wanted to avoid the paparazzi." They squeezed through the chain-link gap and sprinted across the tarmac, dodging between parked Cessnas and Gulf Streams. The wind was howling, smelling of jet fuel. In the distance, near the main VIP terminal, a sleek white Bombardier Global 6000 was spinning up its engines. A black town car was parked next to the stairs. "That's the flight!" Julian yelled over the whine of the turbines. "And that's Arthur." Arthur Penhaligon, looking nervous and clutching a leather briefcase, was shaking hands with the pilot at the bottom of the air stairs. "Arthur!" Julian roared, his voice carrying over the tarmac. Arthur froze. He turned, shading his eyes. When he saw Julian, disheveled, covered in tunnel slime, running toward him, his face drained of blood. "Go! Go now!" Arthur screamed at the pilot, scrambling up the stairs. "You're not going anywhere, Arthur!" Julian tackled the man on the third step. They tumbled down onto the hard concrete. The briefcase flew open, scattering not papers, but stacks of bearer bonds and a passport with a fake name. Arthur scrambled backward, crab walking away from Julian. "Stay back! She made me do it! She said she'd ruin me!" "Who?" Julian advanced on him, his eyes blazing. "Say her name, Arthur. Say it!" "Vanessa!" Arthur sobbed. "Vanessa Sterling. She has photos from the Christmas party. She was going to send them to my wife. I had to give her the access codes." "And the drive?" Julian demanded. "Did you plant the drive?" "No, she did. I just gave her the data." Touching. A cool, feminine voice cut through the wind. Julian and Alice froze. Coming from behind the landing gear of the jet was Vanessa Sterling. She was flanked by the two mercenaries from the warehouse. She looked immaculate in a white trench coat, her hair perfectly coiffed, a stark contrast to the grime-covered Julian and Alice. "You really are like a cockroach, darling," Vanessa sighed, checking her nails. "Hard to kill." She gestured to her men. They raised silenced pistols. "You can't shoot us here," Julian said, stepping in front of Alice. "This is an airport. There are witnesses." "The pilot works for my father," Vanessa said dismissively. "Arthur is leaving the country." "And you two?" "Tragic accident. A mugging gone wrong near the perimeter fence. The police are already on my payroll for the investigation." She walked closer to Julian, stepping on the scattered bonds. "I won, Julian. Aegis is mine. The board voted this morning to suspend you pending the investigation. Once you're dead, I inherit your controlling stake as your grieving fiancé. It's perfect." Alice peeked out from behind Julian. Her heart was hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. She looked at Vanessa, then at the confident guards, then at the terrified Arthur. She realized something. Vanessa was arrogant. She was looking at Julian, gloating. She wasn't looking at the help. Alice's hand moved slowly to her back pocket. She didn't have a weapon. She didn't have a phone. But she had the one thing Julian had given her back in the apartment, the spy transmitter from the Chinatown electronics store. Julian had told her to buy it. It was a simple, long-range audio bug designed to broadcast on FM frequencies. He had set it up in the taxi to broadcast to a specific cloud server he had access to, hoping to catch Arthur. Alice clicked the tiny switch on the side of the device in her pocket. "You admit it then?" Julian asked, his voice loud and clear. He knew what Alice was doing. He had felt her move. "You framed me for treason. You stole the DOD files." "Of course I did," Vanessa laughed, throwing her head back. "And the best part is, no one will ever believe you. You're the disgraced tech bro. I'm the sterling heiress. I own the narrative. I own the truth." "You own nothing," Alice said, stepping out from behind Julian. Vanessa sneered at her. "The waitress. I should have had you crushed in the garbage compactor at the restaurant." "You're live, Vanessa," Alice said, holding up the small black box. Vanessa frowned. "What?" "This isn't just a recorder," Julian said, a smirk cutting through the dirt on his face. "It's a localized broadcaster. But I didn't link it to a cloud server. I linked it to the airport's emergency frequency." Vanessa's eyes widened. She looked toward the terminal building. Through the glass walls of the VIP lounge, dozens of people, travelers, staff, security, were pressing against the windows, looking at them. Over the airport's PA system, usually reserved for announcements, Vanessa's voice had just boomed out. "Of course I did. I framed him for treason. I own the narrative." Sirens began to wail in the distance. Not the polite sirens of a paid-off patrol car, but the heavy, chaotic sirens of the Port Authority Police and the FBI. "You idiot!" Vanessa screamed, lunging at Alice. But Julian was faster. He caught Vanessa's wrist mid-swing. "It's over, Vanessa. The game is rigged, but you forgot one thing." "What?" she hissed, struggling against his grip. "Waitresses hear everything," Julian said. "And they know how to deliver the bill." The two mercenaries looked at the approaching flashing lights, looked at each other, and holstered their weapons. They weren't paid enough to fight the FBI. They turned and ran toward the perimeter fence. Arthur Penhaligon sat on the tarmac, weeping into his hands. As the FBI SUVs screeched onto the runway, surrounding the jet, Julian let go of Vanessa. She stumbled back, her face a mask of shock and ruin. Julian turned to Alice. She was shaking. The adrenaline was crashing. He pulled her into a hug, tight, desperate, and real. He didn't care about the mud on her clothes or the oil on his suit. "You did it," he whispered into her hair. "You saved me." Alice closed her eyes, listening to the sirens, and for the first time in 24 hours, she breathed. 6 months later, L'Orangerie was still the most exclusive restaurant in New York, but tonight, the best table wasn't occupied by a diplomat or a movie star. It was occupied by Alice Jenkins. She wasn't wearing an apron. She was wearing a stunning emerald gown that matched her eyes. Across from her sat Julian Thorne. The scandal of the sterling treason had dominated the news for weeks. Vanessa was awaiting trial without bail. Arthur had taken a plea deal. Julian had returned to Aegis, purged the board, and rebuilt the company stronger than ever. But he had made one major personnel change. "So," Julian said, pouring the vintage champagne himself, he refused to let the waiters do it. "How is the first week of classes?" "Intense," Alice laughed. "Law school is no joke, but it's easier when you don't have to work a double shift afterward." "I told you, the scholarship is permanent. You don't owe me anything." "I owe you for the tuition," Alice said, raising her glass. "But you owe me for the therapy I needed. after the sewer tunnel. Julian smiled, reaching across the table to take her hand. I think that's a fair trade. You know, I'm looking for a partner, not in business, in life. Someone who knows when to slip me a note and when to kick down a door. Alice squeezed his hand. The waitress who had been invisible was now the only thing he saw. I might be interested, she smiled. But you have to promise me one thing. Anything. No more French food. I'm craving a burger. Julian laughed, tossed a stack of cash on the table to cover the untouched meal, and stood up. Come on, Alice. I know a place in Queens. And as they walked out of the restaurant, hand in hand, the staff didn't look at them with envy or disdain. They looked at Alice with respect, because they knew you never mess with the waitress. What a roller coaster. From a dropped napkin to an airport takedown, Alice proved that courage comes from character, not a bank account. What would you have done if you found that USB drive? Would you have warned Julian or walked away? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel grow. And subscribe with notifications on so you never miss a drama. I post new stories every week. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.